The loneliness of modern life. There is something strange happening, something that almost nobody talks about directly, but almost everybody feels. You can be surrounded by people, at a party, at work, in a relationship, in a family, and still feel completely, utterly alone. Not the kind of alone that happens when no one is around, but the kind that happens when people are right there, and something still feels missing. A distance you cannot explain, a glass wall between you and everyone else, the feeling that no one really knows you, not the real you, not the version of you that exists underneath all the performing. And the frightening part is, you cannot always point to why. Your life might look full from the outside, your phone might have notifications, you might have people who love you, and the loneliness still comes, quietly, persistently, like a room that is always slightly cold, no matter how many people are standing in it. Today I want to talk about that, not the loneliness of being physically alone, but the loneliness that lives inside modern life itself, the kind that is growing quietly, in the middle of more connection than any generation in history has ever had. And I think understanding it might be one of the most important things we can do for ourselves. Let us start with something honest. Loneliness is not new. Human beings have always felt it. It has been written about in every language, every era, every corner of the world. But something has shifted. Something has changed in a way that is genuinely different from anything before. Because for most of human history, loneliness was a temporary condition, something that happened between connections, between the village and the campfire, between the letters and the visits, between seasons of belonging and seasons of solitude. But today, for the first time in all of human history, loneliness is becoming a permanent background noise, a steady hum that does not stop between connections, because the connections never actually stopped, they just stopped being real. We are constantly in contact, always reachable, always visible, always technically together. And yet, more people report feeling profoundly lonely today than at almost any other point in modern recorded history. The United States Surgeon General called it a loneliness epidemic. Researchers have compared its health effects to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. 1 in 2 Americans report measurable feelings of loneliness, and in the younger generations, the ones who grew up with the most social technology ever invented, the numbers are even higher, more connected, more lonely at the same time. And that paradox, that painful, confusing, deeply modern paradox is what I want to understand today. Think about the kind of connection human beings were actually built for, not the kind we have now, but the original kind. For almost all of human history, people lived in small groups, tribes, villages, communities where everyone knew each other. Not just knew of each other, actually knew each other. The way you know someone when you have sat with them through difficult seasons, when you have shared meals and silence and grief and celebration, when someone has watched you fall apart and stayed anyway, that kind of knowing, the kind that takes years and proximity and real shared experience. And that kind of knowing was not optional for our ancestors. It was survival. You needed your tribe. You needed to be seen by the people around you, not because it felt good, but because without it, you did not last long. Belonging was not a luxury, it was biological. The need to be truly known by others is one of the deepest needs the human body has, as real as hunger, as physical as thirst. And for most of human existence, life was structured in a way that met that need, Not perfectly, not without pain, but consistently. There were people around, real people, people who knew your name and your history and your face when you were tired. And then everything changed. Somewhere in the last century, and accelerating dramatically in the last few decades, the structures that used to create that belonging quietly collapsed. Extended families spread across states and countries. Neighborhoods stopped being places where people knew each other. Churches and civic groups and community organizations, the kinds of places where people used to gather regularly for no particular reason, started emptying out. The third place disappeared. For a long time, sociologists have talked about the importance of the third place, not home, not work, but the third place. The coffee shop where the same people showed up every morning. The barber shop where conversations ran long. The park where neighbors actually talked. The bar where the bartender knew your name, not because you told them, but because you had been coming in for years. These places were not just pleasant. They were doing something essential. They were creating the low-stakes, repeated, unhurried contact. That is the actual raw material of human connection. Not the deep conversations, not the meaningful moments, just the steady presence of familiar people, the ordinary human texture of a shared life, and that texture has been disappearing quietly, replaced with something that looks like connection, but does not feel like it, because then came the screens. And I do not want to simply blame technology. That is too easy, and it is not entirely fair. Technology gave us real things. It let families separated by distance stay in touch. It let people find others who understood them when no one nearby did. It created communities for people who had always felt like they did not belong anywhere. Those things are real and they matter. But something else happened too. Something that was not planned. Something that crept in quietly beneath all the genuine good. The screens began replacing the third place. Instead of going somewhere to be around people, we opened an app. Instead of sitting in comfortable silence with someone we knew well, we filled that silence with a scroll. Instead of the slow, unglamorous, deeply human work of being physically present with another person, we sent a message, a quick one, clean, efficient, and then moved on to the next thing. And slowly, without anyone deciding this, the texture of human contact changed. It became faster, lighter, more manageable, less messy, less uncertain, less real. And here is what we did not understand when we made that trade. Genuine human connection is not efficient. It was never meant to be. It happens in the in-between moments, in the silences, in the boring parts, in the hour that feels like it had no particular purpose, in the conversation that wandered and got lost and found something unexpected. And when we optimized all of that away, when we made contact faster and cleaner and more on our own terms, we did not get better connection. We got more of something that looks like connection and feeds us almost nothing. There is a researcher named Dr. Vivek Murthy who spent years studying loneliness as the United States Surgeon General. And he said something that has stayed with me. He said, the quality of our relationships matters far more than the quantity. That it is not about how many people we know, it is about whether we feel truly known by anyone. And I think that distinction between being known and simply being around people is at the center of everything we are talking about today. Because modern life is very good at surrounding us with people, it is very bad at helping us actually know them or be known by them. Think about the last week of your life. How many interactions did you have? How many messages, conversations, passing exchanges? Probably a lot. Now think about how many of those interactions you came away from feeling genuinely seen, feeling like you had been real with someone, feeling like something honest had passed between you. For most people, that number is much smaller. Sometimes it is 0, and we go days, weeks, sometimes longer, surrounded by contact, starving for connection. And then there is the performance of it, because modern life does not only make genuine connection harder, it actively trains us to perform connection instead. Think about social media for a moment, not as a technology, but as a behavior. When something good happens in your life, what is the first instinct for a lot of people? Honestly, it is to share it, to photograph it, to find the right words for it, to present it. And there is something deeply human in that impulse. We have always wanted to share our lives with others. That is not new, but something changes when the sharing happens on a platform designed to reward the most polished version of what you share, where the measure of a moment is how many people responded to it, where your life slowly becomes something you curate rather than something you live. And over time, something subtle happens. The performing starts to replace the feeling. You stop experiencing a moment and start packaging it. And when you are always packaging your life for presentation, something essential about being actually inside your life starts to slip away. You become a little more distant from yourself, a little more managed, a little less real. And connection that is built between two people who are both performing is not connection. It is two performances happening near each other. And somewhere underneath both performances, two people who are quietly lonely. I want to talk about something that does not get said enough. The loneliness of being misunderstood, not ignored, not abandoned, but misunderstood. The experience of being in a conversation and feeling the other person understand a version of you, but not quite you. They hear what you said, but not what you meant. They respond to the surface. But the thing underneath the surface, the thing you were actually trying to say, stays untouched, and you nod and move on and carry it a little further alone. This kind of loneliness is subtle. It does not look like anything from the outside. You are talking to someone, you seem fine, but inside there is a quiet ache. The ache of not being reached, of almost connecting but not quite, of the gap between who you actually are and who people around you seem to think you are. And for many people, this is the loneliness they live with most consistently. Not the dramatic kind, not the sitting alone on a Friday night kind, but this quiet, daily, invisible kind. The loneliness of being surrounded by people who know your name, but not your weight. And then there is the loneliness that comes from changing, because we change, all of us. Slowly, often without noticing, we become different people than the ones we were. Our values shift, our priorities rearrange. The things that used to feel important stop feeling that way. And sometimes, the people around us do not change at the same rate or in the same direction. And we find ourselves in relationships, friendships, family connections, even partnerships that were built around a version of us that no longer fully exists, and we keep showing up. We keep trying to fit back into the shape of who we used to be, because the relationship matters, because the history matters, because leaving feels like too much loss. But there is a specific kind of loneliness in that. The loneliness of being loved for who you were rather than who you are becoming. Of feeling most known by people who knew you in the past, and most unknown by the people standing right in front of you. It is a strange, disorienting grief, because from the outside nothing looks broken, but from the inside you are carrying a version of yourself that has no one to give it to. I want to stop here for a moment, because I know this is heavy, and if you are feeling any of this, if some part of what I am saying is landing somewhere specific inside you, I want you to know something. That does not mean something is wrong with you. It does not mean your life is failing, or that you are broken in some way that others are not. The loneliness we are talking about today is not a personal flaw. It is a structural one. It is the natural result of living in a world that has quietly dismantled the conditions for genuine belonging and replaced them with the appearance of it. You are not lonely because you are unlovable. You're not lonely because something in you repels connection. You are lonely because the world you are living in was not designed with your deepest human needs in mind. And understanding that changes the question you need to ask. It stops being what is wrong with me and starts being what do I actually need? And what would it take to build toward that? So what do we actually need? Not the things modern life tells us we need, not more followers, not a better personal brand, not a wider network, not more content and more noise and more stimulation. We need what human beings have always needed. We need to be in the same physical space as other people regularly, not for a reason, not productively, just present. We need conversations that go somewhere unexpected, that take longer than expected, that nobody is half watching a phone during. We need to be witnessed, to have someone in our life who knows the whole story, not the highlights, not the curated version, the whole complicated, embarrassing, uncertain, real version. We need to show up for people in ways that cost us something, not because it is convenient, but because that cost, that showing up when it would be easier not to, is what tells another person that they are not alone. And that is what tells us we are not alone either. None of these things are complicated. None of them require a plan or a strategy or an app. They require something harder. They require us to slow down, to be a little more vulnerable than feels comfortable, to choose the less efficient version of connection, to sit with someone in the boring and the ordinary and the difficult, and to let that be enough. There is a concept in Japanese culture called ma. It translates roughly as negative space, the meaningful emptiness between things. In music, it is the silence between the notes. In architecture, it is the space between the walls. And in relationships, I think ma is the unhurried time that surrounds the conversation, the time that has no agenda, that is not going anywhere in particular, that does not need to be documented or shared or made productive. Just two people in the same space, letting time move slowly around them. And I think modern life has almost entirely eliminated Emma from our relationships. We schedule things, we meet with a purpose, we spend an hour and then move on. And in eliminating that space, we have eliminated the conditions in which genuine knowing actually happens, because you cannot schedule depth, you cannot calendar intimacy. It happens in the spaces around things, in the hour after dinner that nobody planned for, in the car ride where the conversation found something neither person was looking for, in the quiet that was allowed to just sit there. And that kind of unhurried, purposeless, deeply human time is one of the rarest things in modern life, and one of the most necessary. I want to close with something that might feel small, but I think it matters more than most of the large things. if you are feeling the loneliness we talked about today, if you are carrying that quiet weight of being surrounded but not known, the answer is probably not a grand gesture. It is probably not a dramatic change to your life. It is probably something much smaller. One conversation where you say something true, something you would normally keep back, not because you have to, but because you are willing to see what happens if you do. One relationship where you choose to show up a little more fully, not the performed version of you, the real one, with the uncertainty and the questions and the things you are still figuring out. One moment this week where you put the phone down, not because you have to be productive, but because the person in front of you deserves to be fully seen by you, and you deserve to be fully inside that moment. These things are not solutions. They will not solve the structural loneliness of modern life. That is a larger problem than any one person can fix alone, but they are the beginning of something. They are the first small acts of choosing real connection over the appearance of it. And maybe, if enough of us start making those small choices, something shifts. Not in the world, not yet, but in the specific, particular life that you are living, in the relationships you actually have, in the way you move through your days. And maybe that is where it always had to start. Not with a movement or a solution or a plan, but with one person deciding that they are done being lonely in a crowd and choosing just once to be real instead. You are not alone in feeling this. Whatever version of this you carry, whatever room you are sitting in, whatever weight has been following you quietly through your days, you are not the only one. And just knowing that, just letting that land for a second, might be the smallest, truest beginning before it fades